So welcome everybody. And welcome everybody that's watching us today online, wherever you may be. And as I mentioned earlier, we do hope that you come and see us sometime and visit with us and feel the love of our congregation and our space here. So everybody had a good Thanksgiving? Yes. I had just a wonderful one. I didn't do much of anything. I didn't have to cook, which is always good. Actually, no one would want me to cook, I promise. It would be a disaster. I can microwave pizzas, though. Does that count? My friend Stephen cooked for like 6 or 7 people, and it was a beautiful day, so we put out tables in the courtyard and got to sit outside and eat. It was just so wonderful and so nice. And then yesterday, Friday, I went to see my sisters in Alabama. It's interesting how life changes, and sometimes really quickly. And I don't know if you're like me, but sometimes I think things that are happening in my life will just always be like that, and they're never going to change. And then when they do, you're kind of like lost. Recently, I've been thinking about and kind of missing in a melancholy way all the conferences I used to go to. For 10 years, I traveled, as many of you know, and I got to go all over the world as far as the Ukraine, and Canada, and almost everywhere in the United States. And I don't know if I'd want to do that now, don't get me wrong. I mean, that was a lot. I traveled literally 48 weeks out of every year. I was only off maybe 3 weekends. And I was blessed because I had people asking me to come to spiritual centers all around the world, and also to come to these conferences where you go for a week and just really envelop yourself in this, these spiritual retreats, which were awesome. And there was one in particular that is the main international conference for what's now called the Centers for Spiritual Living, which used to be called Religious Science. Many of you may be really familiar with this group. They're like our sister group. And they wisely changed their name from Religious Science because everybody thought, they're like, oh, you're a religious scientist, what are you? What does this mean? This is a scary thought, religious and science, Frankenstein, And so they changed their name to the Centers for Spiritual Living, which really reflects what they're about. And sometimes some people ask me who know about both groups, because I've been in both, about equally, Unity and Centers for Spiritual Living. What's the difference? And I can tell you this, if we change the sign out here to Unity Center for Spiritual Living, it would be the same thing. Sometimes I would be in some of these spiritual centers or churches or whatever we like to call them these days, and I could shut my eyes, I couldn't tell you which one I would be in. It's all the same thing. We're all speaking the same language. The Fillmores had a certain way that they talked about things. They considered themselves practical Christians and really based in Scripture and looking at Scripture in different ways metaphysically. They were definitely considered themselves Christian, for sure, but they considered themselves practical Christians, and that they focused only on love and actually using what the Scripture said. So if the Scripture said something like, by faith you are healed, that you can actually be healed. And both the co-founders of Unity healed themselves. You heard me talk about this over and over because they set such a great example for us. And the Centers for Spiritual Living has a saying, you would hear some of these same songs, like We Come Together that we sang this morning. That's Eddie Watkins Jr.'s song. We love you, Eddie, hard, 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 we swear to God. He's been here to see us a couple times. He was the music director at a couple of Centers for Spiritual Living. So all the music and everything entangles together. And so for many years, though, I was really involved with the Centers for Spiritual Living specifically, and I was the music director for many years for their annual conference, which was held in Pacific Grove, California. If you've ever been there, it's completely gorgeous. It's right by Pebble Beach Golf Course. There's a big, huge park they call Asilomar State Park, and close to Carmel in that area. Just gorgeous and beautiful. Some of the most expensive real estate in the country and beautiful places, but they had this awesome, beautiful natural state park that was right on the beach that had kind of rustic cabins. It could hold about 1,000 people. And I went there every year for probably 12 years in a row. And I would be there with like Karen Drucker and Eddie Watkins Jr. and my friend David Alt and Daniel Nahmod. I don't know these names, but we sing all these people's songs. And we were just the core group. And I remember when it was happening, it never occurred to me that it was going to stop. I just felt like we'll be doing this forever. But it did stop, and changes happened, and they got different music directors. And I was okay with it, but I don't know, for some reason, this last week I was looking at some pictures that people were posting, and I kind of got that, oh, feeling. Do you ever do that when you look at stuff in the past? And so it's been really interesting just looking back and thinking about that and feeling kind of melancholy about it. The biggest sensory feeling I would have when I went there, the conference was always in July, and July in that part of the country is cold, very cold, and so I would leave. If I was living in New Orleans at the time or in Nashville or wherever, it would be steaming hot like it is here in July and August. And then I'd go there and get off the plane and it would be like 40 degrees. I'd be like, wow, you know, and I just loved it. So it was a wonderful time. And it's just interesting, I think, how things change. And I just kind of missed that. However, I do know this, that we romanticize the past. You know, when we look at pictures and we look at things, we change it and twist it in our mind to kind of suit what we really feel it should have been like. You know what I'm talking about? We all do this. We all romanticize the past. Because I remember looking at pictures of myself with the music team and some of the pictures of me on stage, and I think, wow, that's so cool. But I remember at the time that it didn't really feel cool, really. I had still had a lot of insecurities then. I was just coming into my own as a solo singing artist. I've never been a singer. You know, I've always been a piano player, and so for the first time I was singing in front of like thousands of people, and I felt very insecure, and I felt, you know, very insecure about how I looked and about, you know, body and all that, and just all that. And it's funny because when I look at myself, I go, wow, that looks so wonderful, but then I think about what I felt. I was like, oh my God, I was like, you know, so insecure. And we romanticize the past. And I guess there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, what the heck? I mean, it might as well feel good. But we kind of leave out some of the other parts, you know, that might not have been so wonderful. But never thought that would end, and here it is, it ends. And I've been missing some of that recently. And, you know, I was talking to a friend and mentioning that in January, it'll be 6 years since I came to this church. And that really is mind-blowing to me to think I was still in my 40s when I came here. Ooh. I mean, a lot has happened, and it's been a glorious ride. I mean, we've had up and down times, we've had craziness, we've had peaceful times. We never had anything like super duper crazy, but you know, people have egos, and we all have ideas about doing stuff. So there's been some challenges, and it's just been a wonderful, wonderful ride. And the main thing that keeps me going to keep doing this is feeling inspired. And that's what I'm going to talk about today, is inspired living and how to keep our lives fresh and new and inspired, because no matter how much work we've done on ourselves and no matter how exciting our lives may be, it's so easy to get in a rut and kind of do the same thing and kind of get, you know, just be like on auto control. And all of a sudden, 3 years pass and 5 years pass, and you kind of wake up and go like, wow, what just happened? Have you ever had that feeling? I have that sometimes when I'm driving, which is kind of scary. I mean, I am watching the road. I'm not like asleep, but sometimes I'll drive, and when I drive, I kind of get into a meditative state. You know, sometimes I write the best songs as a songwriter when I'm driving, because you're just trapped in the car and there's nothing else to attract your attention. So sometimes songs come out and I pull off the side of the road, and I used to have a little cassette player, and now of course I can use my cell phone. But living inspired and how to continue, doing that can be a challenge. And I was going to say, sometimes when I'm driving, I will drive and 15 miles will pass by and I don't remember what happened. You know that feeling? And it's kind of neat but scary. I'm like, what just happened? Like, I'm all of a sudden at exit 85, and the last time I looked, I was at 60. Was I abducted by aliens and didn't know it? And something happened. But I think it's the utmost way that we have to live is through divine inspiration. We have to keep it fresh and we have to keep it new, or we begin to die inside, actually. We begin to die away. Norman Cousins, who wrote the book Anatomy of an Illness, said it so beautifully, better than anyone I've ever heard say it before, when he said, the tragedy of life is not in death, but what dies within us while we live. The tragedy of life is not in death, but what dies within us while we live. And he is right on the money about that. I bet everyone in this room has experienced that kind of, I mean, death sounds so dramatic, but that feeling where you're just, nothing is really inspiring. You're doing what you have to do. And sometimes we have to do that if we have responsibilities at a certain job or something. There's nothing wrong with that. But you know that feeling of just, where's the inspiration? Where's the joy? I want to wake up in the morning and just be excited and jump up out of the bed excited about what there is to do. And I don't always feel that way. Charles Fillmore, who was one of the co-founders of Unity, was such a great example about this. And I can't quote it exactly, but there's a famous thing that he said when he was in his 90s. And he said, in the morning, he said, I jump up and sizzle with zeal about what there is for me to do today. When was the last time you sizzled? Seriously, when was the last time you sizzled? We got to start sizzling, y'all. We got to. Because I know for me, I know that I have a long life ahead of me. I feel like I do. I mean, I don't feel any need to be going off anywhere anytime soon. But who knows? But in some ways, though, I feel like I'm just getting started and just starting to realize all these things that I've talked about and taught for so many years. I'm just now starting to embody them. And so I get frustrated when I become aware that, wow, like these 2 months have passed and I haven't really been inspired. I've just been going through the motions. It's easy to do that, especially during the holidays, because there's so much stuff to be done. And we don't spend enough time by ourselves during the holidays. You know, everything turns external, and, you know, they have this crazy Black Friday stuff and all this insanity, which some people love that. I mean, all for it if you like to do that. I don't want to get trampled at Walmart, but if you want to go do that, that's fine. But Charles Fillmore hit it right on the mark. He said, I fairly sizzle with zeal when I wake up in the morning to do what there is to do. Now that's at 95. 95, so you have no excuse about I'm too old. Unless you are 96 or above, your excuses are done. Anybody here 96 or above? All right, no excuses then. Not one excuse. Get over it. I hear people in their 40s and 50s saying, well, I'm getting old, too old for that. Like, have you lost your mind? I see people now, and I'm so glad this is changing. It's not a cliche when you say stuff like, 60 is the new 40. I think that's true. And even 70 is the new 40, or whatever it is. I think for many, many years, we really bought into that mold of what something's supposed to be when you get old. And for many of us, that's why we go down that road on our path, because, we're creating our lives. We all know that. We talk about that. That's one of our principles. We are co-creating our lives with this presence and power within us. And many times we just co-create what we see. So if the model that you've seen your whole life is you get retired, and you get old, and you decline, and you go in a nursing home, then many times we do that, not because it's necessary, but because that's the path that we look at and follow and automatically do. But that doesn't have to be our choice. I told my niece yesterday, because when I went over to see my family, as I said, and my niece joined my sister-in-law for lunch, and they were talking about a friend of theirs who, they were pulling the plug on a person, and there was a fight about it, as there always is, with the family, like, should we do this or should we not? And I told my niece, I said, you'll probably be, I hope I outlive my sister, because she's 20 years older than me. Hopefully I'll outlive her. And I told my niece, I said, well, you're the one that if I were to be in that situation, you'd be the one. And I said, I want you to know right now, and record it on your iPhone, that if I am laying there and can't do anything and there's no quality of life, you sneak in there and you pull the plug. You do whatever you have to do to get me out of there. Not interested. Not interested. Anybody interested in doing that? No.
What, pull the plug?
Yeah, pull on the plug. We can have you come pull the plug, Paul. But it's so important for us to keep ourselves alive on the inside and to stay inspired and to not let ourselves get in a rut and just continue to do the same things over and over and over again and just accept that that's normal. I love when Course in Miracles says There should be miracles happening every day, and if they're not, something horrible has gone wrong. Something horrible has gone wrong if miracles aren't happening every day. Now, this isn't a judgment if you're not experiencing that. It's just an ideal to know something that is possible. That's what spiritual masters have done for us. Jesus, there's probably nobody in this room that I know of that could live at the conscious level that Jesus lived, where he was totally awake. I always just imagine Jesus as being totally awake in this dream of duality. He was here in the dream, but he was awake, and he saw the whole thing, and he knew it. I don't know of anybody here that's like that, and if you are, please come forward, and you can begin to speak, and I'll sit down and listen to you. Be happy to. But these spiritual masters were showing us what was possible. They were showing us what was possible at the highest level of consciousness whenever we totally awaken and remember who we are. And that's why they never worried. That's why Jesus many times, not only Jesus, but all through the scriptures, he mentioned over and over, like, why worry? You know, even the birds are taken care of, and plants are taken care of. If the animals of the world are taken care of, surely God will take care of you if you allow it. And so many times we lose our inspiration because we spend a lot of time worrying. That's one of the first things that will begin to decay at our inspiration. We begin to worry. And if we get inspired to do some big thing, we doubt and we won't do it. And we start making excuses about, I don't have enough money to do that, or how's it going to happen? And, you know, and all those things that come up, these grand ideas. But spiritual masters have simply set an example, so we shouldn't feel bad if we can't live at that level. Everyone familiar with Mary Baker Eddy when I say that name? Maybe so. She came from the New Thought system. There's kind of a family tree of what we call New Thought, which are like Unity is part of that, and Ernest Holmes, who started the Center for Spiritual Living. There was a guy named Phineas Quimby back in the 1800s who really started talking about the kind of things that we talk about here, like saying you're creating your life, there are laws in the universe, the law of attraction, and all these things. And from him, there was a family tree that sprouted out, and Mary Baker Eddy was part of that tree, and she started a group called Christian Science, which, if you didn't know her name, you probably heard of that. And she taught a lot of wonderful things, but how she missed the mark, in my opinion, this is just Jack's opinion, is that she didn't fully understand that when the scripture says you can be healed by your faith, that unless your faith is actually at that level of believing you can be healed, then you still need to rely on external things to help you. You can be healed of any disease. Every disease that we know today that we call incurable, every single one of them, someone has healed themselves of it. Guaranteed, promise you. Every disease that science calls incurable, there is someone walking around that completely cured themselves of it. And Louise Hay was one of them. She was given 6 months to live. And not only did she not live to be 6 months, but live for 6 months, but she lived to be 90 years old. The diagnosis, I think, was in her 30s. Not only did she live, but she did sizzle with zeal. Some of you may know her story. She healed herself of cancer, and not only was she set on doing that, but she realized that she had a mission to do, and she started little by little. She wasn't trying to create an empire, but she created a publishing empire of books that have been helpful to people and helped others to heal. And her book, You Can Heal Your Life, was a groundbreaking, best-selling book that just talked about that. And I'm sure that she sizzled with zeal. She just made her transition, I believe it was last year, at 90 years old. And she's an inspiration to me because I'm 55 now, and although I feel like I've accomplished some things, I just feel like there's more to be done and there's more to know. And but sometimes I feel like the clock is ticking. Like, the clock is ticking, I better get to work. And then I have to step back and say, no, right now I just have to be where I'm at and do what's in front of me right now. And I think of Louise Hay and say, she was 5 years older than me before she even started her real life work. She did not start PayHouse until she was 60 years old. So once again, no excuses. We got to sizzle. Everybody ready to sizzle? But these spiritual masters, it's important for us to realize, and I go back to Christian Science, that whenever the scriptures say this is an ideal that is possible. But unless you're at that consciousness of belief, then don't try it. I mean, if you have an illness and you go to the doctor and he says, take this pill, and you feel like you need to take that pill, you swallow it as fast as you can. Medicine, God is in medicine. I mean, medicine helps us to stay here, to continue to grow and forgive and to learn to love. And then there may be another time in our life when we're able to completely heal ourselves in other ways. But, you know, we got to use common sense when we talk about metaphysics. We absolutely do. Sometimes I hear people talking about stuff, and when I used to go to, conferences and retreats, everybody be, talking at lunch and stuff, and I'd hear some crazy stuff. I mean, there's some crazy people in Unity, believe me. There's a reason they call us the Unitics. But it's in a good way, because we think out of the box a little bit, so the world thinks that's crazy, But, I always get a little irritated, which is my own issue, I guess, is that when I hear people talking about things that aren't practical, they're so esoteric and don't use common sense. And I can't think of anything right now, but I've heard conversations just over at the next table or something. I'm like, well, that just sounds too crazy and far out there. I remember, and I do remember one, not a conversation, but I went to a meeting. You've heard me talk a little bit before about the Pleiadians. A lot of people believe that the Pleiades is a star group, and that there are actually these beings, the Pleiadians, that are sending messages to us, and they're circling, and they may be. I'm not saying that they're not. And I went to this one group one night, and they were all excited because they said the time has come that the Pleiadians are going to hook the Earth onto the big mothership and pull the Earth through a photon belt and take us into the fourth dimension. And I was like, all right, I'm out of here. Now, that may be true. I don't know. And that was 25 years ago, and it hadn't happened. And, I'm not trying to make fun, or maybe I am. I don't know. The point is, we have to use common sense when we do these things. We have to, it's great to believe these wonderful, great ideas that sometimes inspire us, but we have to insert common sense, because I want something that works for me. Sometimes I've read books that I loved, and I read and I was excited about, but I couldn't really apply them to my life. So when I got up on Monday, I couldn't use it. I want something that's practical, so that if I get up Monday or Tuesday or Wednesday and I feel horrible and I'm doubting and I don't feel good about myself and I don't feel good about what I'm doing, I want some tools to help me to feel better and to remember who I am as a beautiful, holy child of God. It has to be practical. The New Thought movement actually sprang out of that idea as a backlash to things like Pentecostalism, which I grew up in that. You've heard me talking about my parents being ministers. And in a lot of those situations, you have a wonderful, and it is a divine experience, when people speak in tongues and do whatever. If that's their connection to the divine, it's divine, and it's true for them, But when you do all that and you have this great experience on Sunday, but then you wake up on Monday and you don't have anything to help you through the day, well, really, how's it practical? I want something I can use. I want something that uses common sense, where I don't have to sit in a certain position and stand on my head and, shave my legs and, stand sideways and whatever it is to do. I'll never forget, I got so discouraged the very first time I checked out Transcendental Meditation. It's when I lived in New Orleans in the 90s. And I went to this group. It was actually an official TM group where they brought these devotees over, and they were holding these groups, and you could go to this free seminar and listen to what they had to say. And if you wanted to do it, then you paid a fee and you did it. And I was so excited, because that was the very first time I'd heard of Transcendental Meditation in a good light. We were told as children that it was satanic. We really were. Oh, I don't even know how I'm sane. But some of the stuff I was told. But anyway, therapy does wonders, and our spiritual work. But so I went to this, and I was so excited to be able to hear this and to feel this. And I remember there were so many things that you had to do. You had to go and pick a fresh flower from outside. You had to have a certain mat bought that had been blessed by the Maharishi or something. and you had to wear this certain thing, and I was exhausted by the time they told me what all I had to do. And I knew that if I was supposed to do this every day, I wasn't going to do it. I mean, if I had to go scratch out, I mean, where do you find fresh flowers in the concrete French Quarter, you know? Find a fresh flower and put it in a vase. I was like, this does not work for me. And that's the only reason I didn't sign up for it. I mean, I loved what they had to say. And I wish I would have had somebody to tell me, and I'm telling you right now, meditation and spiritual practice is as simple as being and sitting anywhere where you're comfortable and just allowing yourself to be still, even if it's for 5 minutes, and doing the best you can to allow your mind to become quiet. That's all that it is. If you feel like you need to curl up like a pretzel and assume the lotus position and sniff a flower, well, then do that as well. Nothing wrong with that as well. But this is all supposed to be simple. We're supposed to be inspired by the simple things and live that inspired life. I was going to ask you guys, what's something that really inspires you? Just when it happens or when you hear it, or what's something that inspires anybody? What sizzles you up? What gets you sizzled?
Fall. Like the changing of the leaves
Fall.
right now.
Uh-huh.
And just this feeling of I have energy.
Right.
The summer's been so draining.
Yes.
I have energy. I feel like I could go out and do anything right now.
Awesome.
And just fall does that for me every year. And just seeing the colors, it's like, wow.
So you know that feeling of inspiration. It's like, would you say you come alive? Like that's what I'm saying about now is like inspiration makes us come alive. And for people listening, Tim, our good friend Tim, was telling us that fall and the feeling and the coolness after the summer and all that makes him energized, and as I inserted, he comes alive during that time. So that's something that inspires you. What's somebody else? What inspires you? Yeah, Adam, back. When the Saints win. Well, you know, we laugh, but I get inspired too. That's so crazy because you wouldn't think, you know, it's a football team. It's a football game. You wouldn't think, but why do we get so invested? I mean, you can feel it in the city when they lose or when they win, and I'm not joking. You can feel it when you walk around the next day. If they have lost, it's just this cloud, like just hanging. You can feel it, and the people are moping, and I'm like, it's a football game. But I know it, I feel it too. But when we win, it's like this whole other thing. Isn't that kind of a crazy, that we should do some research about energetically what's happening there. So the Saints, that's a good one. Anybody else? Shelley?
A butterfly taking its first flight.
Wow. Butterfly taking its first flight. Have you had the opportunity to see that? Like its very first flight? How cool. And that's something that's very miraculous but simple at the same time. You know, the fact that it did that and flew off. That's awesome. So anybody else?
Acts of kindness.
Acts of kindness. Maybe seeing acts of kindness? Yes. That gets me, man. I have like burst into tears in public before by seeing something very simple, like an act of kindness that was unexpected. If you look for those things, you will see them, I promise. The world presents to you what you're looking for. If you begin to look for acts of kindness, you will begin to see it. So what else? What inspires you guys? Coming to unity. We love that. Yay. Best answer yet. Yay. So Samantha said coming to unity. Yes. Well, thank you. And we appreciate you being here and all that you do. So these examples show us that it doesn't have to be a huge, big revelation for us to live inspired. That it's of utmost importance that we stay inspired. And sometimes I have to admit in closing, I have to admit that I struggle with staying inspired for you guys. And, after I've been here 6 years, and, so many things have changed and so many things have evolved, and yet there's many things that are still the same. But I'm always checking myself to say, am I inspired to inspire someone? I have to be inspired to inspire you, or else it's not going to work. I mean, we can always smell when someone's being inauthentic. You know that, right? When someone's not being themselves, you can tell it a mile away. But I think we all have to look for whatever we can do to live that inspired life. We have to continue, and it's work in some respect, because it's much easier to default to just doing what you've always done and living a life that's comfortable. I've done that many times, just got into like a little flow and got comfortable, and then I kind of wake up and go like, wow, like I'm not inspired by what's happening today. I'm not inspired by what's happening in my life. But my prayer for us all is that we learn, as Charles Fillmore said, that he fairly sizzles with zeal as he gets up in the morning to do what God would have us do. The most important reason for us to stay inspired is that that's when we can be of most help to others. That's when we can give of ourselves more than ever. Because if we're not inspired, we don't have any energy to give others when they need us. When someone calls or we see someone that is down. So let's all just take a moment and think about our lives. Maybe think of some ways and some things that we can do to keep us inspired, to keep us connected to that vital source of life within us. This vital source of life that is God, that is good. For Spirit is the very breath of God within us, if we are willing to keep ourselves open to that. And so may our prayer be today, Spirit, God, whatever you may call it, may I stay rejuvenated, inspired, no matter what my age, no matter what the conditions of my life, may I continue to look for inspiration, doing the things that I love, doing the things that bring me pleasure and joy and wonderment. And during this holiday season, may we remember to keep our thoughts within. We can get out and enjoy the things that are going on, but don't let that distract us from our inner life. That inner life of inspiration and joy and happiness and love that is our divine inheritance as children of God. You are always loved. You are always taken care of. You are always safe, held in the hands of grace, safe in the arms of love. You are the beloved, holy child of God. May we all continue to live with inspiration and joy. This is the truth about you, and this is the truth about me.